Hello everyone, just a quick little special video. I believe that we have found a better method to take apart the Stgw 57's bipod leg detent assembly. Now if you recall, in the previous Stgw 57 disassembly video, I jigged up the bipod leg in this particular manner using the bipod stirrup and using an appropriately sized punch. Set this on a bench block and then start drifting this pin out. Now if you remember, I used a pretty standard ordinary flat face punch, and the issue with that is that since the pin is mostly flush with the delicate anodized aluminum surface of the bipod leg, you risk slipping when you start the pin out, and this might risk gouging the edge of the hole, or even worse, leaving a fat scratch on the side of your bipod leg, so not optimal for obvious reasons. Now, as kind of a trial or short-term solution, I bought this so-called spring pin punch on eBay and slightly modified the tip to have an even smaller little nipple on it. And the idea behind this is to interface with the cavity inside the spring pin. And this allows, number one, easier removal since I don't have to worry so much about slippage at odd angles. And it provides a bit of support with the inside of the spring pin to avoid the edges collapsing inwards in case I screw up. So the new procedure now, instead of using a standard pin punch, is to start the pin, or actually you could even drive this out all the way using a specially modified punch. So let's demonstrate that. So you can see that once it is aligned with that spring pin, that punch is really not going anywhere. So let's start driving this out. There we go. You can see the pin is out in this case. And of course you would remove the detent, so on and so forth, as mentioned in the Stgw 57 detail strip video. Now here's a question: how would you reinstall that pin properly? So what I would recommend is using these handy dandy so-called roll pin, or really spring pin punches that have a small hole inside them. And what this allows is for the spring pin to be set inside of the punch, and this gives you a lot more control when you reinsert that pin. So you can see right now with the hole aligned, I can simply use the punch to align it with the hole and just get this started. That's pretty useful. You can see, pretty stress-free, the pin is mostly in place. I don't have to worry about using a brass punch, of the brass punch hitting the edges, or actually damaging the punch, because yeah, these are pretty hard spring steel pins. But now, since we have our spring pin punch with that little nipple, I could simply use this to drive the pin all the way without risk of slippage. Just a little bit more. And we are flush. So yeah, definitely I would highly recommend, if you do have to take apart your bipod detent, which is not really recommended, but just in case, it's very nice to have these specialized tools around. Now unfortunately these are import tools. I would love to use Swiss-made tools, maybe by modifying existing punches, but unfortunately I don't have access to a lathe yet, so that's going to be at a future date. And also I want to mention, I apologize for calling these roll pins. This is not the correct term. In fact, the correct technical term for these are slotted spring pins. Roll pins are very specifically coiled spring pins, which means that you have the same basic material, but instead of doing mostly 360 degrees, you actually spin the material around more than 2 times, and this gives you a solid pin that could self-adjust to the hole. The principle is the same with a slotted spring pin, except that it's just a single layer of material that is wrapped around. I just want to mention in particular these type of pins, which are very commonly used on the Stgw 57. Here I have a little selection. You can see a couple of diopter pins or the front sight tower pin. This particular one I believe is for the magazine catch lever. You can see that these are toothed, so in this case these will be called toothed spring pins or slotted tooth spring pins, but you know the name starts getting a bit long. Just a nice little factoid. I stumbled across this interesting video on the company that actually designed and manufactured these spring pins. And what's very clever about this design that I haven't mentioned in the Stgw 57 takedown video is the fact that the teeth are ever so slightly staggered in relation to each other. Now what this means, if I show it in my fingers, is that instead of the teeth aiming for the center of each opposite one, they're slightly offset like this. In fact, the entire pin is kind of bent in this particular fashion if you imagine that the slot is right here. So what happens during installation when the spring pin shrinks, when it is compressed by the hole, is that when the gap between the teeth closes, what this results in is kind of a camming action like this. And because the pin is kind of self-sprung in this particular direction, this results in an extra force outwards of the pin, kind of a tangential force, so to speak. And this results in an even stronger kind of self-holding action of the pin. So that's good to know. In fact, concerning the bipod detents proper, the early pins were simple slotted spring pins, as you can see right here. And there are also later variations that have a little miniature conex, slotted tooth or tooth slotted spring pins. I'm getting lost with all this terminology. So when you disassemble these, you can expect two different variations with relatively different behaviors. So it's important to act accordingly to what you feel when you start drifting these out. So that's about it on my side. Quick little video. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and if you have any questions or comments and feedback, just drop them down below and I'll try and respond if necessary. Have a nice day and see you in the next one.